Bonjour, and welcome on the Gospel Spice podcast, where you are invited to taste and see that the Lord is good. Gospel Spice is your Christ-centered podcast, infused with in-depth biblical flavors and sprinkled with a dash of French culture to spice up your relationship with God. Here is your host, Stephanie Roussel, with a guest today.
Okay, so I have an unusual Christmas-ish episode. I just finished reading a book called 27 Summers by Ronald Olivier, and I'm still recovering from the shock of it. He shares his gripping journey of running the streets in Louisiana, of life without parole at the Angola prison, and then finding his way back home. 27 summers, that's 27 years he spent in Angola prison. And here's, I'm just going to read a little bit of what he says, and then I'll welcome him. The first time that Ronald saw someone killed, he was 12 years old. Death was all around, and after running the New Orleans streets for several years, selling drugs, stealing cars, he murdered a young man at age 16. And so he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. That is his story of how he lost his life, and he's going to tell us how, by God's grace, he found it again inside a prison cell in the worst prison in the States. He grew up in the 8th Ward of New Orleans, and the streets were his playground. He played hard without many consequences until one ill-fated Christmas day when he pulled his gun, fired it, and killed someone. After waiting 2 years for trial, he was convicted of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole in Angola, the Louisiana state penitentiary, which is America's most notoriously brutal prison. And so in this memoir that came out just a few weeks ago, 27 Summers, he gives us an in-depth look into this mesmerizing story, his youth, the adrenaline-filled highs, the utter lows, the 3 decades almost of incarceration, and most of all, God's relentless love reaching into those dark depths. He details finding true freedom during the imprisonment. He details the miraculous release. The story continues to this day, and he tells us about it in today's episode. His goal, and I've asked him why he wrote this book, and he said it's to be inspired by God's unrelenting love for all of us, his grace, his redemption, and they're on full display as Ronald finds abundant life in prison. He attends seminary, he finds forgiveness, he's going to tell us about that. All of this within the context of a life sentence. His motto gives me chills. It's, "Don't tell me what God can't do." And it's the heartbeat behind this riveting story. It's a first-hand example of God's power to transform individuals, families, communities to this day. So, with the deepest respect for you and for the mind-blowing God whom we call Father, Ronald Olivier, welcome on the Gospel Spice podcast today.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to start right away with your story. What happened on Christmas Day?
1991. And so something happened prior to that, I think, that I probably need to discuss. I come from a little area in New Orleans, poverty-stricken area, and man, a lot of drugs and violence was there. And I think a kid's greatest teacher is what he see rather than what he hears. And so, and during that time where the crack epidemic took place, it completely destroyed my neighborhood. And so here it is, I'm in the midst of that. And by the same token, there's a transition with my father, who's my hero. He makes a transition to Jacksonville, Florida. And this little kid is trying to process all of this. I'm feeling abandoned. And so I'm very hurt. And that hurt turns to anger. And so he leaves, and so this crack epidemic takes place, and the streets begin to fall to me. And so consequently, I get in confrontation with a guy. Me and a couple of my friends jumped him. So the next time he sees me, it's Christmas Day on Canal Street. And we're outnumbered. He got about 6 guys. It's just 3 of us, two or three of us. And Um, one thing led to another, and was kind of scared. I had on a starter jacket, and so a lot of people was getting robbed and killed behind starter jackets. And um, I would think not to wear it. I think to arm myself, and so I had a gun, and they tried to snatch me off the front of the bus. I turned around. I really thought one was reaching for a gun, and I started shooting. And two young men end up in a pool of blood. One survives and one died. And I found myself 2 days later in a juvenile facility, um, going to court, and I thought I thought um I thought it was gonna happen like, it usually happened when I got in trouble. I had been in trouble and went to the juvenile facility quite a few times, some minor things, but all my mother or daughter come do is sign me out. And so I was thinking my mother was gonna sign me out this one, and mama couldn't sign me out this one. So consequently, they charged me as an adult, and sent they charged me with first degree murder, which carried a mandatory, which carried the death penalty. And man, here it is. I'm about 17 years old now, and I'm charged with first degree murder. And it really didn't dawn on me. I was always optimistic. Oh, I'm gonna beat this, or I'm going home. This don't really matter. But I think the weight of it took place when the jury was deliberating. I felt the real weight of it, how serious this was. And so I can remember it's about 12 a.m., 1 a.m. in the morning. They put me in a holding tank while the jury deliberating. And I could still hear the door slam, bam, and the keys turn when the guard turned the key, and I could still hear his footsteps fade off until I didn't hear him no more. And I'm all alone in this holding tank. And I begin to think, there's 12 people right now who really don't know anything about me that's making a decision on whether I live or die. And it got real. I was like, man, I don't want to die. And I can hear my mother's voice. I believe God was using her voice. My mother told me, she said, if you ever in trouble that I can't get you out, you call on Jesus. And I got on my knees in that holding tank, and I was crying real tears. I was real scared. And I prayed this prayer. I made a deal with God. A lot of people say don't make deals with God. I made a deal. My prayer was very simple. I said, Lord, if you don't let them kill me, I promise you I'll serve you the rest of my life. And for the first time in my life, I experienced the peace of God. I felt calm. I had this inward resolve that I was going to be okay. I didn't know what it was. I just knew I was going to be okay. And so later I get before the court. So they come back with a guilty verdict of the lesser offense, which is the responsive verdict, second degree murder, which I didn't know, carried a mandatory life sentence without benefits of parole or probation. In layman's term, that means you die in prison. You never get out. And so was kind of real stunned about that, but happy about the fact that, hey, I wasn't dying. I still have a chance. And was very optimistic about that. And so here it is. I have this life sentence. I like to say it like this. In that cell, man, in that holding tank, I really received 2 life sentences. The state was giving me a life with no benefits, but God was giving me a life with so many benefits. He encouraged you in the word that says, forget them not. Forget not my benefit. There's so many you'll forget. And so I got 2 life sentences that day that really changed my life. And so even though I didn't understand what was going on with me, there was really no outward evidence that I was born again. The only evidence that was, because I still talked the same way, was still doing some of the same things. But the difference was I was being convicted. I felt bad about it now.
Right.
I couldn't understand.
You describe,
Yeah.
so this is 1993 when you go to Angola prison, and I want to ask you to give us a little bit of an idea of, I mean, there's no way, we have to read your book 27 Summers, which you absolutely must read if you're watching, listening. I mean, I didn't sleep all night reading this. It's gripping. You describe in there how, so I want you to tell us a bit about what Angola was like, but also you describe when you, I mean, and I'm choking up just listening, listening to you sharing that, when Jesus clearly made you do a 180 in prison and made you throw away cassette tapes and porn magazines that were just offensive to him. And that was kind of you had your own revival after. He didn't give up on you because you gave your life to him. But like you said, it didn't change much of anything at first, but he was faithful to you. So can you describe to us life in Angola a little bit, and then what he did and what that led you towards, and how your life just turned towards ministry in incredible ways?
Yes. And so it didn't really look like I was born again till about 2 years later, and just like um a newborn baby in a natural, when it comes out the womb, it looks like what it been through. It don't, it don't come out looking like the little gerbil baby.
There's no cute little
Or you still,
bows and cute little hairdos and dresses.
no,
No, it's pretty messy.
no.
Yes.
And we be talking about, oh, they're so cute and they look just like a little prune. We be lying, you know. And so it takes the process. It's a process that the baby goes through. It has to be clean. It has to be fed. Um, it has to be cared for. It's totally dependent upon someone else. And so that's how I was. And so here it is. I find myself going to Angola. I never forget the ride, the Long Snake Road, 20 miles to Angola, right off of 61, Tunica Hill. And I'm thinking, man, what's going on here? What have I got myself into? And so I heard all the stories at that they always talked about Angola being the bloodiest prison in the nation. I knew how they preyed upon the young. Um, Most of the young guys that go there, they get raped, and they end up being someone's girlfriends, their slave, and washing their clothes and cooking for them and what have you. And so I made a decision on that bus that, man, I'm going through these gates a man, and I'm gonna leave a man, whether I walk out or I go out in the box. So I was ready, really ready to die. I was thinking, and so, but amazingly, God has this plan. He's orchestrating this. I'm talking about. It's amazing that I just ended up around a bunch of guys who was willing to help me and not hurt me. Man, I went to prison and found some of the most amazing men of God. I'm talking about mind blowing pastors. I'm talking about who's walking upright. These pastors. It's very difficult to be a successful hypocrite in prison. You live in a glass jar. The pastors live with their members.
Right, because these pastors were prisoners who had gone through seminary, right? So they're with you 24/7.
Right. And so, man, they begin to help and disciple me and tell me how important it was for me to renew my mind and read the word, and how your mind had to catch up to what happened in your spirit, and telling me the importance of fellowship and developing a prayer life, And so, man, as that went to happening, my life went to changing. And so I found myself, man, I literally went to sleep one way and woke up another way. And that's about that experience you talk about with the rap music, because I had a problem with not only profanity but pornography also. And so here it is, but I was working very hard on the profanity. I couldn't stop. I'm talking about, man, I was like a professional cusser, and I hated it. I start to hate it. I catch myself, man, I just said that, and man, it just sounds so. And so here it is. I went to praying about it, and I can remember listening to some gangster rap with cuss words just flying through my ears, and God speaking to me. I'm talking about for the first time and the only time I ever heard the audible voice of God. It was loud in my ears. It like came through my headphones. What are you doing? And so I takes my headphones off. I look around trying to see if somebody was around me. Nobody. I said, okay, I'm just tripping. I'm putting back on. I hear it again. And I'm like, Lord, I'm sorry. And so from that moment, I can hear him speaking in my spirit about getting rid of it. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna take all these cassette tapes and give it to a friend. And it was like, if it's not good for you, it's not good for them. So I went to tearing them up and, getting rid of the books and just cleaning my house, and God went to really changing me. And so that launched me into the ministry and helping people. And before you know it, I find myself in a Bible college in 1999. New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. They had an extension center there. It still is there, where you can earn up into a bachelor's degree. Right now, it's a master's. You can get a master's right now, and they extended the program. But I was like, wow. So I launched off into that, and in 2006, I graduated with a bachelor's degree in Christian ministry. And so after that, you have an opportunity to be a what they call the inmate minister, and that's your job through the prison. They give you a certain area, and that was your area to make rounds and just check on people and just minister to them, drop seeds, nuggets on them, pray for them, and just be there for them. And and a lot of men was encouraged and born again because of that, because they had ministers. Here it is, Angola is 18,000 acres. There are several camps there.
Right.
And ministers filled every area of the prison until God completely changed the prison. Till I can remember we was on the ledge joking about, man, we haven't even seen a good fight in a while, let alone someone getting killed or
Right.
jug. And so God was changing, completely changing the place. A lot of people are coming in from the outside. They had Wheaton College used to come spend their spring break with us. They got females, everything that's all down the walk on the yard playing basketball with us.
Right. You had a front row seat. And I seem to remember how you described that you went on a 2-year missionary journey to one of the worst camps, Camp J, I recall.
Yeah.
And how from there, from where you were in probably the worst conditions, revival broke out through you, through others.
Right.
So here's a question. When you left Camp J 2 years later, went back to the main prison, how did you understand what had been happening? How did you re-enter the main prison 2 years later, seeing that revival had kind of broken out everywhere and you had been a part of it? How did that compute for you?
It was a surreal moment. We always knew it was going to happen. We had
the prophecy.
We had prayer teams and prophecies, and so God was showing us what to come. He would give us a little glimpse into the future.
Can you share that prophecy that had been given prior to your coming and that you've been a part of?
Yes, Bill Young. I got a hold of. I don't know where I got it from, but I had a sheet of paper, man, with this powerful prophecy that really changed my life, and it was dated 1995 on it, I think, but I received it in 99 when I got into Bible college, and it said something like this. He said that God woke him up. It was late, he said, but he realized God didn't sleep. It was after midnight. He said God asked him a simple question: where do people keep their most prized possessions? And he was like, they keep them on a lock and key, in a safe, in a bank, somewhere where somebody can't get it. And God began to tell him, that's where I have my most prized possessions. They're in the prisons. And I was like, whoa, so I'm a treasure? I am God's treasure, even though I'm here, And so, and he went to talking about how God was going to build up an army of believers on the inside of the prison, and he said he saw them stepping out. Some had a golden glow on. He said, "There goes my gold." Some had a silver glow. He said, "There goes my silver." And he said he saw them stepping. They became giants, and they were stepping over the fences, and it was going into these areas where ministers wasn't really doing their job. It was taking over churches and different places where they normally wouldn't get in. God was putting them in that position. And so man, it's amazing that I I was a part of that prophecy. You know, I received it. I had them because we had our own radio station with inmates, disc jockeys, and I had them read it through the airways. All the churches in Angola, I passed out copies that they read it to their congregation and that they receive it. And man, it's happening because Angola wasn't a place where people go home, and we saw busloads and intercession prayer of people going home. And today, you can't even count the many people that have went home from Angola. And they're still coming home. The gates are like wide open, and they're doing some great things, you know, in society now.
Right, because everyone who goes to Angola, if I understand, is sentenced to 50 years or more. So basically life. So you're not supposed to leave it. And yet you and countless others have. So what happened to you? Fast forward maybe, and maybe using your motto, don't tell me what God can't do, which is so powerful and so relevant for all of us. Don't tell me what God can't do, and how that led to your parole 5 years ago.
So here it is, 2012. The United States Supreme Court comes down with a ruling that's in Miller versus Alabama that said it was unconstitutional to give a juvenile a mandatory life sentence. Said we should have some meaningful opportunity to freedom because a juvenile is more than likely to be rehabilitated than an adult because their brain is not fully developed. And it's the frontal lobe. It said the frontal lobe of the brain, which helps you to appreciate risk and consequences, is not fully. And so that's why juveniles do some crazy
especially
things.
Boys. Yeah, you know? it's proven boys in particular. Yeah. So yeah, up to age 25, right. 26 right. For sure. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so they come down with that ruling. When they came down with that ruling, that meant that my sentence at the time was illegal. It violated the 8th Amendment, which was cruel and unusual punishment. And so here it is, man, I'm blown away, you know, because I was doing ministry and enjoying life in prison because I was walking in purpose, you know, when there was no light at the end of the tunnel, you know, but there was a light in a tunnel. And that's what I embraced. And he led me to that. And so it changes everything. I go back to court. So my sentence at the time is now illegal. So they have to re-sentence me. I go back to court, and I can remember my lawyers and them. They had this lady on the front row just kept looking at me. You know, she was staring at me, and I'm handcuffed and shackled with an orange jumpsuit. So I don't want to stare at her and make her feel uncomfortable. I know I look probably scary with that type of outfit on. And so I kind of looking at my peripheral, she's still staring, and she looks kind of familiar. I'm trying to figure out where I know her from. So my lawyers comes over, and they kind of nervous. They're like, man, you got some victim opposition. They said the victim's sister here. I said, no, man. I said, that's not the sister, that's the mother. And out of all the people in the courtroom, during my trial, I remembered her. I couldn't remember anybody else, not even my lawyer. The public, as in the words of one of my friends, my public pretender, the one who pretended to defend me. I couldn't even remember his face, but her face burned in my mind for years. I can still see her right now on the stand crying because of me taking the life of her son. And when I develop a prayer life, that's all who I pray. I pray for her more than I pray for anybody in my life. And my greatest desire was not to go home, was to one day have a conversation with her and just let her know how sorry I was, and to ask her to forgive me. And so I saw that opportunity there. So I said, look, see if I can get a dialogue with her. So they go over and try to talk to the DA. the DA talked to her. DA come back and let us know, man, look, she don't want to talk. Whatever she says, she's gonna say on the stand. And so it just so happened that they set the court date back to the following month. And I said, man, okay, great. They give me more time to pray. So I prayed for her. And the next court date, she said she made the gesture towards, my lawyer to have this dialogue, and man, I never forget, man, probably the most, not probably, it is the most difficult conversation I ever had with a human being. Just the look of mother in our eyes, and and I took her babies, her baby from her. That's all she sees, her baby. And it's very emotional here. Excuse me, but so here it is. She comes over. It sits her behind me. I turn around, and I never forget. Her arms were folded, and she was staring at me. And I said this. I said, "Ma'am," I said, "I take full responsibility of the death of your son." When I said that, she released her arms. She took a deep breath and exhaled, and she leaned toward me. And I began to just ask her that she forgive me. I said, this probably, I said, this the most, I said, I have absolutely no excuse. I said, it was senseless. Wasn't really thinking. I said, the worst decision I made in my life. And I said, I pray you can find somewhere in your heart to forgive me. And her response was, man, she said, I don't hate you. She said, I forgive you. She said, I believe you deserve a second chance. Oh, man. Even though I was handcuffed and shackled, I felt that release. It was something else holding me that was tighter than that. That release, man. I was like, man, I didn't really care how the proceedings went after that, because this is my greatest desire. This above me going on, and I just wanted to share with her, how I felt, not knowing what her response may be, And man, she forgave me. And
are you still in touch with her?
No, I'm praying one day that I could.
So you haven't seen her since that day 5 years ago? Yeah.
No,
wow.
No, I haven't.
How has that experience of forgiveness shaped you moving forward, as you had to face, a pretty unjust system and then having to re-enter society? How has that experience, because all these years later, you're still very emotional about it, which is so beautiful.
And so I think the Bible explains it real good. Those who've been forgiven much, they love much. And it is difficult for me to harbor anything, when someone offends me, because of what I've been forgiven of. Who am I to hold it? So I'm quick to forgive, quickly. I'm talking about uncut forgiveness. I'm not holding anything, against anybody. And that's a type of freedom there, because I can remember when I was in the cell, I never forget, I was praying about freedom and asking God, man, to release me and praying. And he went to showing me myself, my heart. He showed me my heart like a cell block of people that I had locked in. And he said this, he said, you want me to free you, but you don't want to let them go. And I was like, whoa, that was very sober. And look, I let the cells open and let everybody go. And so I believe one of the greatest principles in the Bible is the principle of sowing and reaping. Whatsoever man sow, that shall he also reap. And so when you sow forgiveness, you reap it. There's a harvest of that. When you sow change, man, there's a harvest of that. And a lot of people want their situation to change, but they don't want to change. They don't want God to change them, just change my situation.
Yeah. So reaping a harvest of forgiveness That's what you're living right now. So can
Yes.
you tell us what happened? You got paroled, you got out, and now what are you doing?
And so I get paroled, I get out. Man, amazingly.
5 years ago, almost to the date today, you said.
Yeah.
So it's a very
Yes.
special anniversary.
Yes.
And just
Yes.
before Christmas too. So a
Right.
full circle.
Right. And so here it is. Man, Burl Kane, the former warden, calls me of Angola. He he is now the commissioner of Mississippi State Department of Corrections. He's over all the prisons in Mississippi, and so he's looking for chaplains. And he called me to be the director of chaplaincy at Mississippi State Penitentiary in Portsmouth, Louisiana.
That's crazy.
Look, that is insane. If you've been anywhere or know anything about the departments of corrections, that you really understand the weight of that. That's impossible. It's impossible for someone who has committed a felony to get a job, period. At least on getting a job in the departments of corrections, you know. And so that's another
Yeah, you're
miracle.
describing a moment, one of the rare light moments in the book where you're saying you basically at some point pulled up into the parking lot to meet with your parole officer and you were driving the same car.
Yeah.
As him, the same, like government issued corrections facility car.
Right.
And it just
Right.
is this absolutely crazy moment.
Right.
And so you did that for a couple of years, and now you're back working with an organization that helped you re-enter society initially.
Yes, the Louisiana Parole Project, man. We help people who've been long-term, spent 20 years or more to re-enter society. Because a lot of things have changed, cell phones, we have tech classes. We give them classes on scams and also on credit cards and things like that because they're used to they're familiar with cash,
Right.
and something as simple as the self-checkout, that's like mind-blowing, can be very terrifying for a person that's coming home from prison. And so we help and walk alongside. They stay with our program at least a month, and if necessary, they'll go beyond that month.
Yeah. What's been some of your, in this particular job, what's been maybe some of the highlights for you? Is there someone who went through your hands on his way back into society that you've been particularly touched by in the last few months?
I think the greatest highlight is I get to go back into the prison. Part of my job is to go back. Just yesterday, I was back in Angola, talking to some guys.
That's a crazy sentence you just said. You said that one of your greatest joys is to go back to prison.
Right. And because
I'm speechless.
Because I call it filling hope buckets. When people see me, I grew up there. They know me. They know I had life sentences just like them. And so it fills hope buckets and lets them know, man, that could happen for me, And I go there and encourage them, man, not to give up. Keep on, man. Keep moving. Trust God, Your time is coming. You got a time too, because they got some real great guys in prison. I know the media has painted this picture of these animals behind walls, but there are real people there with real hearts that's connected to real families that made some bad choices,
Okay, what is Jesus doing in Angola right now?
Oh man, he's still doing some things. He's still encouraging guys. He's still changing people. I think Angola is a place where a person gets at the end of their rope. You get to the bottom, there's nowhere to look but up, And so when you get to the end of yourself, that's the best place to be, no matter where you're at in life. And that's where God can reach you at. That's where he wants you at, broken right there. And man, he's still doing some great things there. There's still some guys that's coming out, man, and really impacting their communities where they go, because they've been through it. They've been through it, and so we have a problem with these youngsters who are just killing one another. And the answer is the answer for that is the guys that's in prison who've been rehabilitated, that's been reconciliated, that's really been changed. and they're not scared to go into the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right,
exactly. It's a missionary force unlike any other, because there's no fear whatsoever there. So as we end, I want to be mindful of your time. Why did you write 27 Summers now? And what are you hoping for people like me when we read it?
I wrote it when I first came home. I was extended an invitation by Jim Cymbala, who followed my book, real good friend of mine, to come to Brooklyn and share my story. I had never shared my story before. I was so used to in prison preaching and teaching the word of God. I never shared my story, never thought it had any value. And was kind of embarrassed about it. Didn't want to tell anybody everywhere I went, I'm not introducing myself as a former inmate. I don't even want you to know that about me, because I felt people would prejudge me. And so here it is, I step out and share my story to the point where I was very transparent, and it did something in me. It freed me. It freed me, one, and amazingly, after the service, the response I got of how it was helping other people. I was like, hold up, what's going on here? And so that brought me to the point of, putting it in a book where, everyone can experience that throughout the world. And even after I'm gone, hundreds of years later, somebody can pick up 27 Summers and God can still breathe upon them and change them. And so that's what I want to share. I hope people see that no matter what area, no matter what situation they're in, that if you trust God, man, He can change your situation. He can change you, that there's nothing impossible with Him. Don't tell me what God can't do.
Yes.
Don't tell me what He can't do. And so that's what I want to get out, and I pray that people be changed by it, that they be born again. That's one of the reasons why I chose 27 Summers for the title, because that's the type of I wanted to reach the masses. They got people who are not Christians that will pick up 27 Summers, because it was a tug of war between 27 Summers and Don't Tell Me What God Can't Do, of being the title.
27 Summers is much more evangelistic. I mean, I could see a lot of people picking this up as just a good read, and the way you weave Christ into all of this is right. I mean, it's your story. No one can argue that. This book is a powerful testimony of what God won't do. There's nothing God can't do. And you're weaving it in such a way that it definitely appeals to a very wide audience. And that's beautiful. I've been praying for you and your family, your wife and your son, your little boy, ever since I finished reading your book. And it's an honor to hear your story. And I and, all of the people listening, watching this, I'm sure, are going to join me to thank you for writing this, for being so brave, and truly for praying for you, for the work you're doing to bring awareness also to the harsh conditions and the unfair conditions of the justice system, and you touch on that in the book as well. So Ronald Olivier, thank you so much for being with us today. It's truly an honor to meet you, sir. Truly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Grateful to be here.
Hi, Jonah here. Thank you for being part of the Gospel Spice family. If you've enjoyed this episode, you will love receiving our newsletter. It contains value-packed free gifts and rich content each month. It's at gospelspice.com/sign-up. There is always something new and exciting happening around here, and I don't want you to miss out. Sign up at gospelspice.com/sign-up. Did you know Gospel Spice has a YouTube channel? There's exclusive content there too, so join Gospel Spice on YouTube. Also, please give us a star rating and a comment on your podcast listening app. Your reviews actually really do make a difference to help others discover and experience Gospel Spice. As always, we are praying for you. You can confidentially email us your prayer requests and praise items at the email address contact@gospelspice.com. It's our privilege to pray for you. So, I'll leave you with 4 things to do. Please pick one and do it at your convenience. 1, sign up on our website for our newsletter to receive gifts you're going to love. 2, find us on YouTube and see what content we've put together to help you grow closer to Jesus. 3, rate Gospel Spice on your listening app. It's one of the easiest ways to share the gospel. And finally, 4, tell us how we can pray for you. Merci.